Today in the Chicana kitchen, we're making chocolate crackles. These brownie-like cookies are a favorite around the holidays, or in my household, any day of the year. The dough can be a bit messy to work with, but I have a few tricks that will help you keep the mess to a minimum. So, let's get baking. We'll start with 226 grams or 8 ounces of bittersweet chocolate. You can chop that or do as I'm doing and use bittersweet chocolate chips. And we'll melt that gently in a double boiler or in the microwave like so. We'll set our melted chocolate aside and mix our dry ingredients together. So we'll start here with 1 1/4 cups or 156 grams of all-purpose flour. Always the ingredients and the full recipe are in the description below. All right. To this we add some Dutch cocoa powder. I use Hershey's Special Dark. You can use any kind of Dutch cocoa powder. I'll put a note below if you want to use natural cocoa powder. It just changes the leavening you use. So for Dutch cocoa powder, you usually use baking powder, which is what we'll do. Here, there's a little adjustment you can make if you've got natural cocoa powder instead. Anyhow, it is 1/2 cup of Dutch cocoa powder, which works out to 43 grams for you measuring by weight folks. And if you're making a wish list for holidays, birthdays, etc., and you don't have a digital kitchen scale, I really do recommend having one. It's so much easier to do this stuff. And you don't have to use as many spoons and cups and things when you're measuring. All right, so to this we'll add our 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I always use kosher salt. You can use table salt, just go a little bit lighter in that case. And then we will stir this together for 30 seconds or so, more is fine. You just want to make sure that that leavener, in this case the baking powder, is really thoroughly mixed in, and that way you have a nice even rise in your cookies, cakes, whatever it is you're making. And once that's thoroughly stirred together, we will set it aside as well. Tuck our scale away too. And move on to our butter and sugar. And so in the bowl of a stand mixer, you could use a large bowl and a hand mixer as well, whatever works for you. We'll have 1 1/2 cups of light brown sugar. That's about 310 grams. And in there as well, we will put a stick of unsalted butter, and you want to make sure that that butter has been out on the counter for long enough to reach room temperature, or cheat a little and cut it into chunks and microwave it on very low for a few seconds at a time. All right, so we will mix that with the stand mixer or hand mixer for 3 minutes or so on medium until it gets to a light and fluffy texture. So pop that onto the stand mixer and check that out in a moment. After 3 or so minutes of mixing, here's our butter and brown sugar. And to that, we will add 2 eggs. If you remember to get them out and have them at room temperature, great. If not, no big deal. And 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And we will mix that until it's just thoroughly incorporated. Scrape down the sides of the bowl at least once. Some of that butter and brown sugar mixture will stay stuck to the bottom otherwise. So mix a little bit more. Now that that's mixed, we'll scrape down the bowl again and add our melted chocolate. Scrape all that into our large bowl, and we'll be mixing that with the stand mixer or hand mixer. Once again, just to have everything thoroughly incorporated. So however much mixing it takes not to see streaks of chocolate alternating with the butter or sugar egg mixture. After about a minute of mixing and scraping down the bowl, we've got our melted chocolate incorporated. And next what we'll do is alternate additions of the flour mixture with 1/3 of a cup of whole milk. If you don't have whole milk, it's okay. 2% or skim will do, but whole milk if you happen to have it. And we will alternate those additions and just mix just enough for each one to get incorporated in. A few streaks of dry mix when we do that are okay, as long as we make sure it's all thoroughly mixed in at the end. So we'll see how that looks when the dough's all done. And a quick note, when adding your flour cocoa powder mixture, definitely start that mixer low and increase the speed to medium very gradually. Otherwise, you will have a nice fine dusting of cocoa and flour across your kitchen. When you're adding your milk, you don't really have to turn the mixer all the way off, just turn it to low, and that'll work just fine. And here is our chocolate crackle dough in all of its sticky, messy glory. So what makes chocolate crackles so tasty, or at least one of the things apart from the chocolate itself, is that they're these really soft cookies, almost like brownies. But to get a nice soft cookie, you have to have cookie dough that is almost like brownie batter. And when forming those into individual cookies, it's going to get messy no matter what. But we do have a good technique down in the Chicana kitchen to minimize the mess and the amount of cookie dough that gets lost to your hands and the cookie scoop or any of your other tools, instead of going right onto the cookie sheet and into people's bellies. So what we will do is divide this dough as best we can into 4 equal portions, and kitchen scale folks, this winds up being 1,000 grams of dough, so 250 grams each. I will put the standard measure for that. It's about 9 ounces, if I'm not mistaken, into the description. So what we're going to do is divide this into 4, and we are going to wrap each portion of cookie dough in plastic wrap and shape that into kind of a log of cookie dough. And what that will let us do is kind of go with a slice and bake method. So one at a time here, we're going to just kind of plunk cookie dough. We'll zero my scale and we'll plunk cookie dough onto the plastic wrap, and we'll aim for 250 grams or so, and then just wrap that up into almost like you're making, this doesn't sound the most fun and cookie kind of a thing, but almost like you're making sausage and you're wrapping sausage into a sausage casing. Yeah, maybe that's gonna get cut in the final video edit, we'll see. Anyhow, so I'm gonna take this with my scale out of the way. I'll just kind of take that and that dough and sort of spread that across a little bit. It doesn't have to be a super long, skinny shape, but just something that will allow us to slice it into 8 little chunks, kind of almost little medallions of cookie dough. So we're gonna wrap that up as best we can and repeat with the rest of our cookie dough. And then once we have those cookie dough logs formed, we can refrigerate them, actually better yet, freeze them for at least 2 hours. Overnight is great. You can prepare this way ahead if you prefer to do so, and this stuff will keep well wrapped, as it already is, in the freezer for months at a time, and then you can have chocolate crackle cookies at the ready, or almost ready, anytime. All right, so we're going to do this with the rest of our cookie dough, and we will see that when we're ready to bake at least 2 hours from now, after it's as cold and frozen as we can get it. My cookie dough is frozen as solid as it's going to get. My oven is preheated to 350 degrees, so I am ready to bake my chocolate crackles. I've got a cookie sheet. This is the big cookie sheet, a half sheet pan lined and ready to go, and a bowl each of granulated sugar and powdered sugar. You'll need about 1 cup of each of those, but I put a little bit in the bowl at a time and just add as I go. All right, and speaking of a little bit at a time, I'll work with just one of these frozen logs of cookie dough at a time because they really don't stay solid for long. They warm up quickly and then things get messy. So I'm going to set that sugar aside for just a second and unwrap this cookie dough. And I'm going to slice this into a total of 16 pieces. We can get out the scale and get super precise, get out a ruler or something like that. But I am just going to eyeball it and just keep slicing it in half and half again. All right, and so on and so forth until I have 16 pieces all together. And once you get to the pieces in eighths, you might, depending on how skinny you rolled these, if you rolled it really skinny, just keep slicing into kind of coins. I didn't roll this one super skinny, so I'm gonna cut the eighth into halves. And what this does for me is it gets me closer to a ball of cookie dough with minimal handling, really just the knife and the tips of my fingers. And you can see just the tips of my fingers already have cookie dough on them. This stuff is super soft. Again, it won't really freeze solid. It will just get kind of closer to solid and a little bit easier to work with. All right, so once I have these pieces, again, handle everything as little as possible. I'm just gonna kind of nudge them closer to a sphere shape. We don't need to be perfect with this. You probably don't need to roll. You can roll them with the palm of your hands, but they will stick. They'll stick to everything. All right, and the more cookie dough that's stuck to you, the less cookie dough makes it to the cookie sheet and into your belly. So we won't go with perfection here. We'll just do kind of the best we can with them. And we will keep going at this until all of these are in little balls of cookie dough. And then we will put those first into the bowl of granulated sugar, like so. Just toss that around. You can use a spoon if you want, or just use your fingertips again. And then into the bowl of powdered sugar, and this double rolling of the cookies will create the crackle effect that gives them their name. All right, and place onto the cookie sheet as you go. I would not crowd these, they do spread, so no more than 12 per big cookie sheet. And once we get all of these formed and rolled again, they will go into that 350 degree oven for 12 to 14 minutes. I like to check them at the 12-minute end, sometimes even closer to 10 minutes. And what we're looking for is for them to crackle on the top. So this uniform coating of powdered sugar makes them look like a snowball, which is in fact another name for them, will crack. And as soon as that happens, they'll still look super soft, but pretty much as soon as they crackle all over, at usually for me about the 12-minute mark, they're done, and take them out of the oven and let them cool the rest of the way on the cookie sheet. So we'll see them when they pop out of the oven. Our cookies are out of the oven. They crackled at the 12-minute mark, just as we predicted, and now all that's left to do is to let them cool completely on the cookie tray. Or maybe let most of them cool completely on the cookie tray and give a warm cookie a try. We hope you give these a try and you check back every Friday. at 4 o'clock for a new recipe.